Hello, all, and welcome back to a new episode of Movies and Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we're going to be reviewing the film The Piano Lesson. All right, Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for The Piano Lesson.
Follows the lives of the Charles family as they deal with themes of family legacy and more in deciding what to do with an heirloom, the family piano.
And more.
And
It's
more.
all-encompassing. Yeah. Lots happens. All right. So in Movies and Us tradition, we will start off with our one-sentence summaries for The Piano Lesson. Sarah, what is yours?
Mine is, who needs a man when you have a piano and generational trauma?
Oh, yes. Bernice don't need no man. She is doing her thing. Yes.
She's
so
sure
much.
is.
Her life, there's so much happening in her life that a whole another human being a part of it. She's just like, not right now. Sorry, my dude. Okay, my one-sentence summary is a buzzing family affair on and off screen.
Yes. Yes, there's some meta levels to that.
Which was so interesting to think about this movie's unfolding. So anyway, well, let's dive in. We're going to share our thoughts about The Piano Lesson at a high level. We won't spoil this movie quite yet. Let's dive right in. Sarah, what are your thoughts about The Piano Lesson and where did your mind go while watching this movie and afterwards?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I was riveted, which is not surprising because I'm really enjoying these August Wilson plays to the screen that Denzel Washington and now his family are giving to us. I think that this is great. So I enjoyed the movie itself, and I think that there's a lot of really great things happening here, great performances. The writing is just phenomenal, as you would expect. And then I also just think that this is such an important film. It's cool to see these plays being adapted to the screen, making them more accessible to people, and just celebrating some really great, just a phenomenal Black playwright. I think that that's so important, and bringing these stories to the screen it just feels important to me. So I enjoyed it on multiple levels. I think there's so many rich themes in this. There's so much going on in this film, and I also just love that it exists.
Yes. It's been so fascinating to watch this journey that Denzel's committed to about bringing these 10 plays from August Wilson to the big screen. And so many of the ones in the past we have absolutely loved and adored. So, with Fences and Ma Rainey, we ate that up, and so to see this next installment was really interesting. And just also think about the ways that many of the themes are in conversation with each other, but are explored maybe through these different lenses is really interesting. So my brain was kind of bouncing back and forth between being immersed in this film and this story and this family, and then also putting that in conversation with so many of the other characters and themes that we've seen in some of his other films. If his other plays put to the big screen was really, really just meaningful. There's some interesting choices that I think this film makes that use the medium of film in a very intentional way. There's lots of flashback moments. There's some kind of effects from the spiritual realm that are leaned into, I think, that kind of change the way that I as a viewer am receiving this compared to if it was truly put to the stage. And so I'm excited to talk about some of those pieces with you, because I think that usage of the medium to communicate and all those new devices that are available to Malcolm Washington was really interesting to see what he chose to lean into. And then, man, there's just so much to talk about with these characters. I didn't even know where to begin, but I think that there's going to be just a lot for us to discuss with this one. And I think overall, I connected far more deeply with Fences and Ma Rainey, but I wonder if this one might grow over time with me, because there's a lot here that I feel like I'm still thinking about and processing. I just finished watching it like only like 12, 18 hours ago. So still very fresh and still lots to mull on.
Yeah, I watched this last night, and it's one that I want to watch again. Like I feel like there's so much there that I missed on the first viewing, because you can't take everything in the first time that you watch it, and the text feels so layered and the dialogue just feels like there's extra meaning there that I wasn't able to pick up. And that, so I'm definitely going to watch this again. I just didn't have time between last night and right now to watch it, because I'm also interested in the pacing of it, and I really loved the way that this story unfolds, and the way that characters are introduced or concepts are introduced, but then we don't really learn about them until later. And so this idea of, okay, I'm gonna kind of set the table a little bit, and then I'm going to like place all the meat and potatoes on the table later. You know, it's this like, okay, I'm going to set it up for you. I'm going to give you a little inkling, a few questions to maybe be asking, and then I'm going to pay those off 30 minutes later. And I loved the way that the film does that over and over and over again, because these characters, they're all in a family. They all know each other, but they don't have all of the information. And it's cool to see the way that the script, the screenplay, August Wilson's original play, uses those characters so strategically, because they can be having a conversation about a topic and they know a surface level amount of information, but it's not until later that they're able to dive in and learn more about what really happened to X character. So I loved the way that was structured, and I want to now that I have that, all of the context, I want to be able to like watch this again and really better appreciate those little details and see how the film really like seeds those concepts for us way earlier, and then the payoff happens later.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there's so much happening in this movie, and there's so many scenes where like 4 or 3 characters are all talking at once together, which is so fun. And you're thrown into the mix of this family, into the deep end. There's no buildup, no real backstory. And you're kind of catching up of like, okay, who's Crowley? Who's this person? What happened here? You know? And so I love the way that the play and the film are just kind of unafraid to let us get fully immersed in the world of this family, and is not holding our hand and dipping our toes in. And I think that's also why a second viewing will be really meaningful, because for a good first chunk, you're just hearing people crosstalk constantly. And every throwaway little comment felt like there was so much like meaning behind it and emotion behind it, you know? So there's a lot of like side comments that Boy Willie and Bernice are saying as they're like frustrated or whatnot. And they feel like such windows and keys into how they feel. We don't see the full fruition of that, obviously, until the end of the film. But even at the beginning, you can feel that those tensions are there. And knowing the journey that we go on to go back and watch all of those little moments, even the way that Doker, like, joins in to kind of smooth things out and kind of be the reconciliator, but then sometimes he kind of sides with a certain side. You know, when does he choose to make some of those choices too? Would be really fascinating to watch. So it just feels like almost like each character has like a gajillion layers, and then you throw them all together and all of their layers are like folding and intertwining with each other. And so there's so much to think about, to listen for, and to follow along with in this film. And I love that the play and the film are unafraid to trust that we will figure it out and that we're going to come back for more.
Yes, and all of these characters are so dynamic, and the way that they interact with each other is absolutely fascinating. Their personalities are so different from each other, and there's so much built-in history there. So even though we don't really know what's going on. We know that they all have a long history and these really, really deep relationships. And it's really interesting to just watch them kind of collide with each other. And I love the way that the dialogue has these highs and lows, and it's like this really, really like confrontational, like big moment where everybody's, doing their crosstalk, and it's loud and everybody's feelings are on the table. And then there's a lull, and we have a moment to just breathe and catch our breath before we go into the next thing. And it's this really beautiful rhythm that the dialogue has to keep you engaged and wanting more, but it also knows when to pull back and when we need that rest and that break, or we need to just be able to like sit in a moment for a second before we're able to move on to the next thing. And that pacing just felt so right to me, to just, the film just gingerly leads you to the next thing. And it was just, I love writing like that. It's you don't get it very often, but when you do get it, it's absolutely magical.
Yeah, very much so. And using some of these other characters who aren't as passionate and have strong convictions to be some of those transition moments too. Like, I think to watch this movie through the lens of all of the moments that it's cutting to Maritha and kind of what she's observing or what she's feeling. There's so many times where we'll cut to the little girl as she's observing everything that's happening and wondering, like, I kept wondering throughout the film, like, what is she absorbing? What is she noticing? What conclusions is she drawing? What is she taking in? Because she's kind of our stand in a lot of ways, like she's seeing all of the adults argue and bicker and fight and cry and then make up and sing. And she's seeing it all and taking it all in. And so I think it'd be fascinating to see, like, when is she there? And then when does the film choose to cut to her as kind of this nod of like, man, there's something here that she's absorbed in a certain moment. Would be just a fascinating like way to watch this movie. And they also use Lyman kind of as a character who serves a kind of connective tissue and buffer between some of the other much more blatantly flashy personalities as these transition moments as well, to give us some bit of respite as we transition to the next big moment.
Yeah, I think Lyman and Doker really are in some ways those kind of like middle ground characters. You have Boy Willie on one side and you have Bernice on the other. And then I feel like these two are kind of in the middle, and they can kind of see both sides, and both of them empathize to a degree with the two siblings, but are also, especially Doker, willing to draw those boundaries. When Boy Willie really gets out of line, that's when Doker's like, nope, you're not going to cross any further. Stop yelling at her. Stop giving her a hard time. Like, they remain almost neutral at times and are trying to learn from the other. And I loved those moments when, Lyman shows up with Boy Willie and they have this whole plan together. And throughout the course of the film, you see Lyman at times kind of taking Bernice's side too. And so you can just tell that he's constantly like listening and taking in information, and then is just gonna call it like he sees it. He's not like perfectly aligned to Boy Willie. And I thought that made for some really interesting dynamics between these principal characters in those kind of heated moments.
And they're such anchor points too, like they are so necessary to the relational stability and those buffer points, the kind of connective tissue, so that Boy Willie and Bernice don't continue to dig themselves in the directions that they already are digging their heels in, and so they're able to be those key reconcilers, which we need in group dynamics and family dynamics, to say, okay, well, let's we can see her side a little bit. I know you don't agree, and it's very maybe triggering and emotional for you to even fathom that possibility, but let's take a step back and look at it. You know, we need the Lymans and Dokers of the world to really bring people together instead of fueling the divisiveness. And I think they both play such a vital role in this family dynamic remaining somewhat balanced and healthy and stable as much as it can be, given all of the history that they've been through.
And we already touched on this, but I love that the film just drops us in to this sibling dynamic with all of its issues and how these two really don't see eye to eye. And the film kind of starts at 100. You know, like Boy Willie showing up in the middle of the night to the house and just like barging in and being loud and trying to wake Bernice up. Like that is such an indication of who this character is. Like he's so big. And you're like, wow, okay, this is a choice to come and visit your sister. But I love that we don't get any exposition or explanation for these choices. You know, we are just along to see it. And then over the course of time, we see how these two interact and we get to learn more about the rift between them, and we get to see just how different their personalities are. But yeah, we get no explanation for why they are the way that they are at first. And all of that kind of comes in as the film unfolds. And I thought that was just so beautiful. We don't need exposition. Just drop us into the action and we will figure it out. It's just trust the audience, and the piano lesson definitely trusts us to figure it out.
Yeah, we are also like Bernice. It's like 3 a.m., bleary-eyed, don't know what's going on, and we're just thrown into the situation with all of these personality dynamics in this family. Okay, well, let's give a spoiler alert. If you haven't seen, The Piano Lesson is available to stream on Netflix. Netflix using its force for good to bring The Piano Lesson to all of us. So we will now dive fully into the film and the plot of the film. All right. What are some big things that really stood out to you that we wanted to make sure to mention? Maybe some moments specifically in the film that you're like, man, I'm gonna remember this one from this movie.
One of my favorite moments is when the four men are just
I was hoping
you already know.
Yes, this is where you were going to go. And when you said 4 men, I was like, let's go. Oh my God. It is.
I love that I don't even need to finish. You
just said
know.
When the 4 men, and it's just immediate. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. But please share, like what about that moment just absolutely captivated you?
Oh, it's so good. So the 4 of them just sitting around the table, and then one starts singing, and then eventually they all just start singing together. And it comes a little while into the film too. So we've seen a lot of contention between these characters and a lot of butting of the heads. And then just at the table, they're able to have this moment together that is just so powerful. And just hearing their voices sing together, the thing that tickled me so much is that they use the same inflection and they form some of the vowels in the same way. And then they use the same kind of like syncopation of some of the words. Like it didn't feel rehearsed to me, but it just felt like when you've spent so much time with other people and you just know how they act, you know how they form words, you know how they sing their songs, and it just felt so natural and so organic. And just for me, it felt like one of those moments of respite in this film. We've had a lot of arguing, we've had a lot of loud noises, we've had all of this, and then it's just this moment for them to come together and share with one another through song. And it also just shows the depth of their bond and their relationship. And yeah, they might be estranged. Yeah, they might live in different states, have wildly different perspectives on the world around them. And yet they are still family. They are still together, and they are still for one another. I just thought all of that encompassed in this really beautiful song that they're able to sing was just so effective.
Oh man, that scene is just gives you the goosebumps, truly. What I love about that scene is that it lasts longer than I expect it to, and it could not, I mean, I wish it never ended, like I love that the film chooses to let that moment really have time to breathe and to fully bake. I think there's another version of this film that probably would cut it, like half of it. And I just love that we get the full experience of them singing that song together. And then there's this kind of silence that settles over all of them, this like kind of moment and feeling of catharsis as they kind of come back down to earth. So it really felt like this transcendent experience that they were all sharing in together. They were no longer four individual men, but they've truly become one together. And it feels like such an interesting foreshadowing to that final moment in the climax of the film where we see Bernice feeling that connection with her ancestry through music, through this object that has connected them through generations, but it's her act to contribute and lean in and play it that creates music and connects them together. That kind of transcendent connection that's formed through the power of music and unison in that way is really interesting. And so that moment with the four men feels like such a echoing of what we see later on, which is truly this transcendent connection that's formed with the people of your family beyond the present. So I thought that I wouldn't have known that echoing was going to happen by the end of the film in this moment. But now looking back, those two moments put into conversation with each other is really interesting as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing that I kept thinking about during that scene, I kept thinking about in 2020, Steve McQueen came out with a series of short films called Small Acts. And I kept thinking of, there's one of them called Lovers Rock, and it's a very different film. But in Lovers Rock, there's this moment when the actors, while filming, got caught up in the moment and singing an a cappella song together. And it is one of the most like phenomenal moments that I watched that year. And that I didn't love Lovers Rock as much as some of the other films, but that moment when the actors were just swept up in the song just stands out because obviously, like, actors are so talented and they're able to emote so much and it comes through the screen. But I feel like there are certain moments where it's just organic and natural and the camera just happens to be there to capture it. And that scene in The Piano Lesson felt similar to me. Obviously, this song is scripted and it's part of it and all of that, but it just felt so natural and organic. And there was that special something that is sometimes captured in film. And then all of that is just so beautiful and wonderful. And like you said, it contributes to the larger plot of the film as a whole. And it is that foreshadowing of these larger themes around family and what binds us together. And I think that's just, it's such a cool moment, them sitting around this table singing together. But I think it just demonstrates how deep and rich the writing of this particular story is. And there's so much to glean from this. From every little scene, you could probably break down and learn so much from it. And this is just one example of that.
Yeah, for sure. And you get to see that, like, some of the like actors like get up out of their seat about halfway through when they're singing, because it almost feels like uncontainable, that it needs to be expressed with his full body. And I think it's something that, we were talking a little bit earlier around the kind of difference in medium between the stage and film. And I love that with this filmed version of that moment, we really get to be right up close to see the facial expressions and the full detail of them singing this right up close and personal, which would be different. If not one's not better than the other, but it's just different when you're farther away from being able to see that. But I love how much the camera leans into a lot of close-ups of each of the men's faces, kind of rotating through each of them as they're singing in this moment. I think that made really great use of film as a medium to feel that intimacy with them as they're expressing so deeply in such a raw and vulnerable way.
And the camera is so mobile throughout the film, but especially in that scene, there's so much camera movement, but it's not distracting. That's one of those times when, as you're kind of like circling these dudes and seeing all of their faces, it feels so natural for this song, for there to be, because the characters are moving. So it makes sense that the camera is also moving in concert with the characters. It created this like kinetic energy as you're watching all of these men move and get swept up in this moment. And we are also swept up in it through that viewpoint of the camera. It just, that scene is so good.
So good.
I just wanted to watch it again.
And I love, once again, while we're talking about the camera, the close-up shot of that first stomp was amazing. It was like guttural, reverberated inside of my being and my bones. But it felt almost like this like rallying signal to the people, to the four men in the room, but also to like everyone else who's watching and experiencing this of like, let's go. Like, we are about to begin. And we did not know what we were in for. But man, I thought that first stomp felt like such a kind of rallying signal for the scene that I didn't even know it was to come, but felt like something significant was about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just also the audio and the mixing of that. And everything is in balance, and the stomping, the clapping, all of that is in perfect balance with the voices. And even the way that each man's voice is mixed together in that, and you can clearly hear all four voices. It's so well done. You feel like you are in the room with them as they are swept up in this song.
I didn't want it to end, honestly.
Me neither. I was ready. Like, let's just keep going.
It kept going, and I kept being like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you haven't cut this yet. Like, yes, keep going. I really appreciate how much, this is like a 2-hour film, and that scene is like several minutes straight of them singing. And I love how much they knew that was important to let that breathe fully and have its full reign of screen time. Man, we could gush about that scene for forever.
I know. We've been talking about this for so many minutes, but this might be my last thing that I will say about this, but I love that scene is included because this whole film, the premise is arguing over a piano, a musical instrument. And these four come together to create music together without the aid of that musical instrument. And so it's just so interesting that the piano is so central to this film, and yet they don't use it because they all have their reasons for not wanting to touch the piano, but they don't need it. They're doing life without that piece of it. And I don't know. I think it's an interesting choice because the piano is right there. The piano is such the focus of everything in this film, and yet they don't use it.
And we barely hear the piano used at all. We barely hear music at all. up until this point. I think there's one small moment. I don't know if it comes before or after this scene with the four men where Boy Willie is teaching Maritha how to, play a little bit. But that's about it. That's the only other time I think that we get to hear the piano being played at all, until the very ending scene where Bernice is playing it and connecting with her ancestors in that very big dramatic moment. But up until that point, there's everyone, like you're saying, is like slightly terrified / wary of going near the piano, kind of this feeling of something significant about it and its presence.
Yeah, its presence is always felt. We know that the piano is there. We know that the piano is important. And I love that in some ways the piano is also a ghost. Like we see, Sutter is haunting them, but in some ways, like it's really the piano that is haunting them, and it's all of the memories attached to that. And then obviously that ties into the whole like ancestors and relying on them for how to get through this. But I love that this film is also in portions filmed like a horror movie, and especially the music. There are certain musical moments, especially when we transition from like one scene to another or one location to another, that the music sounds like something out of a horror film. And I just thought that was such an interesting way to frame all of this. Sure, it's about this sibling conversation, but there are also these cinematic elements of horror that are infused in to really, I think, highlight some of these themes that the film is wanting to explore. And I loved that creative choice. I thought it was so smart.
Yeah, I think especially by the time we get to the ending moments of the film and we see that, there's a figure of Sutter's ghost like literally haunting this family, and kind of zooming out and recognizing that so much of what Boy Willie and Bernice are arguing about for most of the film, like both sides and perspectives feel incredibly valid. There's not one that seems to be more right than the other. They're thinking about how to honor their past and honor their family in different ways. One sees it as the ability to be able to go and take what was given to them and make something better out of those resources. The other sees it as treasuring and honoring the precious items that have been created by the hands of their ancestors and have been fought for and advocated for by their ancestors. And so you then zoom out, and by the end of the film, you realize that like so much of what this family is experiencing and has gone through over the generations is still being haunted by the trauma of racism and slavery being part of their past. And it's fueling so many of the emotions and convictions of this current generation, but so much of it stems from what every generation before them has experienced and gone through. And so there's a very clear, like, metaphorical symbolism in this like white man, the slave owner that has owned generations of their family, haunting them in their home, but kind of also this triumph of beginning to take steps to heal those generational curses, those generational trauma that has been kind of suggested by the film to be constantly looming beneath the surface and kind of creating and sowing division, but that ultimately, like, they are together as a generation moving forward and healing and reconciling so many of those things. And so, like, it's neat to see the way that this movie is almost like, playing with that concept and tropes of a horror genre, and yet there's so much metaphorical and symbolism meaning that is also infused into who is haunting them and what that means for this family. And then you kind of bake that into this larger, like, relational conflict that's happening in the present realm. And there's so much that's interconnected there.
And there's a moment when Doker is in a conversation with Boy Willie. Doker says, "Nobody said nothing about who's right and wrong." And I loved that because they, Boy Willie, he wants to stay in Mississippi, and he wants to take that land back, and he's so certain in his way of doing things, and that is his path, and that is what he's going to do, and he sees himself as right. And Bernice has taken a very different approach and is not going back to Mississippi, and she's staying in Pittsburgh, and she's building a life there. And then obviously they have their different perspectives on the piano, you know? Boy Willie wants to use it so that he can buy the land and retake what he feels they are owed. And Bernice is keeping it as a way to honor and remember. And I love that the film gives space for both of their perspectives and both of their ways of doing things, and not taking a stance on one is right and one is wrong, but both of them are both right and wrong throughout the film. And even in the end, you know, Bernice is still in her home. She is still with the piano, and Boy Willie goes back to Mississippi. And they've both grown and changed and learned some things over the course of time, but they're going to continue on the paths that are right for them. And I love that there isn't one right answer, but each character is moving and doing in the way that makes sense for them and is the best next step for what they believe to be right.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is the way that you see that their approach to honoring their family and what they believe is right is in contention with each other. You know, like, so, you know, I can relate to Bernice when Boy Willie comes in and is like, let's sell it. I'm like, this is my family's prized possession that they labored over, they created with their hands. Like, how can you not see all of that beautiful sentimental value of treasuring this thing, and you're just going to go and treat it like a piece of, like an asset, you know, like your watermelons, like that. You can see how that can be emotionally triggering. And then similarly in the other direction, you can see how Boy Willie's got this clear forward momentum that he wants to run a direction. He feels like he's being held back by this over sentimentality. And so both of them are kind of touching on each other's and kind of igniting and triggering each other's emotional responses, because it feels like something that they value is being threatened. And somehow the other person's inability to see the value that they've placed on something is frustrating, you know, especially when it's something that you treasure deeply. And so I thought that way that was written was really genius, because it's not that they're just arguing about different approaches, but in fact, the approach that each of them are advocating for directly feels like it's triggering an emotional response for the other. And I think that's kind of like pretty geniusly woven together by August Wilson for these two characters and like how they're arguing. I find that like so many relational conflicts often look and feel very similar to this, is that like we both are kind of right, so we feel really justified to argue our stances, but it's because I'm advocating for this that feels in direct contention with something that's important to you, that feels kind of like a personal slight, or it feels like it's a kind of gut punch, guttural response. And I thought that like distilling of the emotional way that this conflict is charged was pretty ingenious for August Wilson.
Mm-hmm. And I love that they all have such deep and complex emotions throughout all of this. Like, none of these characters are two-dimensional. They're all three-dimensional. If there are extra dimensions, they probably have those as well. And I love, especially for Bernice, because she has kept this piano, and I initially thought that it was this like fond, sentimental feeling that she had toward this piano. And we see over time that that's not really the case, and that playing the piano actually was damaging to her, and that was harmful to her. And you see, as she's talking about her mother, this this grief that her mother carried that then affected Bernice and the way that she goes about her life. And I thought that was so interesting, that this piano that has so much meaning and, you know, honoring the ancestors whose faces are engraved in it, is also a source of pain for her. And I thought that was really interesting to just think about. And it's not warm, fuzzy feelings that she has attached to this thing, but it's darker than that. And it's more fraught than that. And I think that makes her decision to keep it even more interesting, because it was a reminder of some of the pain that her and her family went through.
And I think it makes that final moment of the film also feel extra weighty, because we know how hard that has been for her as well. So it adds the extra emotional stakes for this character having overcome so much. You know, it's not just her doing the thing to connect with the ancestors to bless the home. No, but this is like a huge emotional step for her to take, to even dare to set her fingers on the piano and play it.
Yeah, it's such a momentous moment in this. And I love how it's all set up too, because just before that, when she's talking with Avery, and he's given her his preacher pep talk, you know, of like, yes, you can do this. I believe in you. You can do this. And she starts to walk toward him and walk toward the piano. And it's almost this like, oh, is she going to do it? Is she going to touch this piano and play these keys? Like, is this the moment? And then she kicks him out. And I love that it's after that she is finally able to do that. And it just felt so right, because she's been slowly inching toward the piano. She's been slowly making her way to this point, but just can't bring herself to do it. And then the moment when she finally does, it's so intense and it's so well done and just incredibly powerful. And that's partially because of the acting. Danielle Deadwyler is just a phenomenal actress. But I think it's also just because of how good the writing is and how perfectly all of that is paced. So when she finally does play the piano, it is a mix of all of those feelings that have been building up over the past 2 hours.
Yeah, I love the way that scene with Avery is like blocked and shot and paced, because my heart was like, oh my gosh, she's gonna do it. You know, I was like, there's so much hope. There was so much anticipation of this huge moment for her. And it almost also, because Avery was standing there as well, it felt like a growth not only in playing the piano, which has been a fear for her for so long, but also the emotional opening up for her to Avery as well. They're kind of like all intertwined there. You know what I mean? So there's just like so much seemingly huge breakthrough that was about to happen in that moment, and then she stops, and she's so resolute in kicking him out as well, that you're like, this, you just see the walls and the fears and the old ways of thinking about so much come rushing in again. But the fact that she even took those 2 steps feels like such huge progress as well. So I love the way that scene was shot and blocked in the space, because I think there's we get a like shot from behind Bernice looking at the piano with Avery right behind it as she's walking toward him, and all of that feels like she's walking towards her future. She's walking towards her healing. She's walking towards emotional vulnerability, and then she pauses. And I thought that was just some great like structuring of the shot, but also, man, the playing with my emotions is highly effective, because I was like, is this about to happen? Nope, it's not. It's not. Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, this film has such it understands human beings very well and knows how to play with our emotions and get us just on the edge of our seat to see what's next. And even though we only spend 2-ish hours with these characters, we are so invested in them and we want good for them. We want what's best for them. And so when she is taking those steps, you know, toward her future, toward health, toward all of the things, you know, it's like, yes, you can do it. You can do it, Bernice. We're rooting for you. But it just wasn't time yet. And I loved that seeming moment of progress. And then nothing happens. Mm-hmm. And then we have to wait a little while longer until she is finally able to actually take that step, which just feels so human too. Like we are filled with mixed emotions. We are filled with so many different things motivating us. And sometimes growth and healing and all of those things look like, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back sometimes. And so I loved the way that Bernice is written and just how complex she is and how she grows and changes over the course of this film.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. We definitely needed that moment to get us to the ending growth that she experiences. I think without that feeling of almost progress in that moment, that ending scene might feel jarring and felt like we weren't teed up for it. And so that little step, that half step towards that full step that she finally makes at the end of the film felt so essential to get us emotionally there, to buy into, like, yeah, she's been nearly ready for this. And now this is just the full culmination of all of the growth that she's already been experiencing over the course of the film.
Oh, yes. Bernice, we're rooting for you, girl.
So good. While we're talking about Bernice and Avery, I loved the whole monologue that she gives to him around, like, how much woman am I? Everybody's telling me I can't be a woman without a man. And I just thought that was such a great moment. I mean, this is set in like 1930s Pittsburgh, you know, like there's still so much around gender roles and expectations that are prevalent at the time. And so for her to advocate for herself and choose to be in the place that she is and not to say yes to this man who I'm sure would give her a lot of societal benefits and economic benefits, all that kind of stuff. But for her to say, like, I have so much that I'm stewarding right now in my orbit. I'm taking care of Marith. I've got Doker here. There's community that I have here that I feel like I'm working through and I'm responsible for. And also, like, emotionally, I'm not ready yet. And her willingness to not compromise when he's clearly very persistent is really incredible. So I love that moment for this female character in this play, in this movie that's filled with men, that she has a moment where she's standing her own on what her convictions are.
Yes. You go, Bernice. It's such a great moment. And I love that in our media landscape, there's so many films about women who have gone through traumatic things, and the point of the story is that they find healing in a new romantic relationship, basically. And that's cool. Whatever. Those can exist. Those can be enjoyable. But I love that this film goes in the exact opposite direction. And she knows that she is her own person and she doesn't need that relationship to define her, which is the antithesis to almost every rom-com that exists in the world. So my little non-rom-com heart really enjoyed that. But her focusing on her priorities, and she knows that her daughter needs her and is willing to do whatever she can for her, and that Bernice also has some stuff to work out. And I think that that's just so important, especially for women, especially younger women, to understand, like, we don't have to jump into romantic relationships, and romantic relationships don't define us. And just because you're single doesn't mean that you are broken or, you know, whatever society is telling us. You know, society has such terrible messages to women. And I love that Bernice is just out here going, no, that's not it. That's not right for me. Maybe one day, but not right now. I can't do this. I have stuff going on that is far more important, and that's what I'm going to prioritize. And like she says in the film, it doesn't make her any less of a woman. And I love that. We need that clip of that film, and we just need to put it everywhere. We need to have it like ready to go. So we are in like holiday season. When a family member comes and asks, hey, why are you still single? You can just play that on your phone and just
pull
shove
up
Bernice in their face.
Yeah, jot down the timestamp.
Like, just don't even. Yeah. Let me play a clip for you that will hopefully illustrate this.
Well, and you're so right that like she has the wisdom to understand that this is what she needs, and it's also fair for Avery as well to have and be with someone that is able to emotionally give fully. And this, I think the film insinuates that it's only been 2-3 years since Crowley passed, who I'm assuming is her past partner or husband or whatnot. But like, there's still healing that she's experiencing. And so it's wise for her. It's wise for him. It's loving for her to not choose to say yes and then irresponsibly have to walk out some of that with him when she recognized that he deserves someone who's able to give emotionally fully as well. So there's just so many layers of the wisdom that she's been able to see and make that choice for herself and for him as well.
It's so interesting to me because the men in the film make little comments about it's been 3 years. You know, it almost as this like dismissive thing, like, Bernice, it's been 3 years, like, get it together, move on. And I love that she isn't swayed by that. Like, I do think that we can get stuck sometimes in our grief, but she also understands that 3 years is not a long time. Like, that's a pretty short period of time. And grief looks different for everybody. Healing takes time, and we don't have to be like rushed or forced or like pushed in any kind of direction by the people around us. Like, we can process through our grief the way that we need to. And Bernice is, again, she's advocating for herself and saying, no, I am not ready. And so that emotional awareness to know what she needs and not be rushed onto anybody else's timetable. I absolutely love.
Yeah, she's an incredible female character, and we love to see it on the big screen, you know? We got to celebrate it when it happens. So she really takes up the bacon for that one. Okay. Other big moments that we wanted to mention before we wrap. There's still so much, but what are the big ones?
There's so much to this film. Something that I wanted to talk a little bit about, like, the bits around the movie too. Like, I just love that Denzel Washington has committed to bringing these 10 films to the screen. And I think it's so important because, like, the theater has been it's been so white for so long and just had so many like white gatekeepers for so long. And so taking a Black playwright who wrote some just incredible plays and bringing them to the screen, which is so much more accessible. I love that more people are able to experience these stories and grapple with these themes that wouldn't have been able to, maybe couldn't afford to go see this in the theater, but they can see it streaming on Netflix at home. And I love that that's happening, and that's how he is investing his money into helping make this happen. And I think it's especially important right now as like people are trying to rewrite history and maybe erase or sanitize slavery and Jim Crow and like all of these things that Black Americans went through. And so I think that this is just, it's so important, not just for people to be exposed to August Wilson, but just experiencing stories like this that are we don't have a lot of these, you know? There's so much white-focused media. And I think it's really important to have these stories that are preserved for us so that we can watch them, and we can watch them easily. So good job, Netflix. We give Netflix a really hard time on this podcast a lot of the time, but sometimes they use their powers for good. And this is one of those really beautiful moments where I'm glad that Netflix is doing this.
Yeah, and I think the accessibility of this film being available on a streaming platform is like really exciting to see, you know, and there's this type of film coming out in theaters, I'm sure is going to get a much lower viewership compared to it being available on a platform that a lot of people have already that they can put on and experience like really great cinema, and maybe lowering that barrier to entry for people to be able to sit with these stories. I think that it's like we mentioned, Netflix using their powers for good. And, you know, amidst the absolute, you know, giant library of mediocre content, there's sometimes these gems that come through that are really able to reach so many more eyeballs than it being a theater release, which I think is just like a powerful medium to be able to use. So yeah, we will give the flowers over to Netflix when they deserve it, and when they really make the distribution of something like The Piano Lesson really widely accessible and just lowers the barrier to entry. It's very exciting.
Mm-hmm. Good job, Netflix. We're proud of you. And better job, Denzel Washington and fam.
Oh my gosh. It really is a full family affair. I think 4 Washington family members are a part of this project. You've got Malcolm directing, John David Washington featuring, and then Denzel and I think his daughter Katya are producing. Like, what?
Yep.
Incredible.
It's amazing.
It's really crazy. And the exciting thing is that this is what, 3 out of 10? So we have 7 more lined up. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah. I am also really excited about it. Like, let's go. I'm here for this. Yeah. They've all been so incredible. And so let's keep it going.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, we are here for this. I will see. I think that there's possibilities that we'll definitely be talking about this film in the coming months as we head into awards season. So we better be talking about this film as we head into awards season. I shall correct myself to say.
Like, come on, the Academy. Like, we also give the Academy a hard time because they also make terrible decisions sometimes. But we need them to make good decisions here. This is such a well-made film. Yeah. Like, get it together.
Yes, please. All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of The Piano Lesson. You can find it available to stream on Netflix. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about The Piano Lesson. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Movies and Us Pod, or email us at moviesandUsPod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss the 1922 film Nosferatu. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you again very soon.